You're listening to The Whole Truth, a Resources Rising Stars podcast.
Welcome to the latest episode of The Whole Truth podcast. I'm Paul Armstrong. I just had a chat with Tim Lannery. Tim is the Managing Director of Mitre Mining Corporation. Mitre is part of the Steve Parsons and Mike Naylor stable, known to our audience perhaps through their previous success at Bellevue Gold, more recently Firefly Metals. Mitre is in the silver game. Silver, believe it or not, is hot. It is, as many people put it, the next lithium. The problem for investors is there's not a lot to choose from in the ASX. Mitre is one of a very small handful of stocks that has exposure to silver, but plenty of exposure it does. The market cap now, following the raise of just over $60 million, the company has plenty of leverage to exploration success at its Cerro Bayo silver gold project in Chile. The company has 3 rigs on the case now. It's got its own on-site laboratory, which means that news flow should be strong and consistent. With a 50 million ounce silver equivalent resource already, and just to put that in context, that's equal to about 600,000 ounces of gold. Mitre is set to generate growth, strong news flow, backed up by the likes of Parsons, Naylor and others. This is a story that looks like it's going places. Its time has come. Silver is the metal of the moment. We're going to hear a lot more about it over the next few months. But how do you get exposure? Mitre Mining is one of the very few opportunities on the ASX. Tim explains what they've got, what they're going to do over the next few months, and how that should create value for shareholders. Tim, Mitre Mining's just put its foot in the water to test investor demand and interest in silver exploration. What did you find?
What we found was overwhelming support from the institutional investor market for quality silver projects. What we ended up with was multiples of what we were looking for. So we raised $10 million at 45 cents. We opened today at 54 cents, which is remarkable given the market. What we found was that all the institutional investors that followed us from the Bellevue days, the Firefly days, followed us into this as well. So overwhelming support. We now have over 50% institutional investors on the books. And what we found was that there was overwhelming support from the books. So we could have closed multiples of what we were asking for.
Okay, now you mentioned you got support from those who have had some nice experience, to say the least, in the likes of Bellevue Gold and Firefly. Now, for those of our listeners who haven't followed this closely, of course, Bellevue Gold and Firefly, the common theme there is a couple of chaps by the name of Steve Parsons and Mike Naylor, who were among the founders. Steve, the founding managing director of Bellevue Gold, and which has been a runaway success, as we know, into production now, and the company is absolutely flying. Firefly is Steve Parsons' new venture. For the want of a better phrase, Firefly is a copper explorer doing its thing with a giant, fantastic project called Green Bay, and the share price has performed very well there. So I suppose it's to be expected, Tim, that those who have done well in Firefly and Bellevue and following Steve Parsons and Mike Naylor have said, hey, the guys are going to perform their magic tricks again, we'll follow them into Mitre.
No, that's right. There's a trusted name in the business. It's Steve and Mike and Ray, who are the founders of Bellevue and were on the board of Firefly and have now come into Mitre Mining. So the investors themselves trust these people to manage their money and get quality projects behind their name.
But of course you need more than a name, though, don't you? I mean, it's very well having great people, successful people associated with things, but you do need a project that's got the criteria. It's the real deal. It's got growth potential, and the company's going to do something about unlocking that growth. Now, the raising that you were just referring to, $10 million, what are you going to do with the money?
The money primarily is going to be spent on drilling, which is what the group does. It has done at Bellevue, done at Firefly, and now we're doing it at Mitre. So a lot of that money is going to be spent on increasing the drill rig capacity and drilling out and extending the resources that are there. This is a fantastic project, and there's multiple targets to test on the ground.
Now, you've already got a resource, 50 million ounces of silver equivalent. I think it's worth pointing out to people that if you do a rough back-of-the-envelope calculation, 50 million ounces of silver is worth about 600,000 ounces of gold. So if you want to get to the magic mark, 1 million ounce gold resource mark, you're probably talking circa, 90 million ounces of silver?
Yeah, no, 90 million ounces of silver is about that million ounce mark. The project itself, it's had a long history and it has produced over 100 million ounces of silver already. A lot of the ore is still there and a lot of drill investment's been put in over the 30-year mine life of the operation. So we're just building on that and putting the new ideas into the ground to actually advance it.
And the equation you obviously just put to investors as part of this raise is the company going into the raise had a market cap of just $44 million. So this thing has hardly already had its run. And at $44 million with the equivalent of 600,000 ounce gold resource, people would say, well, there's a disconnect clearly in that valuation. And they believe there's obviously a lot of growth to come in the resource. Can you see a path to double that resource, circa 100 million ounces of silver?
Yeah, we can see a pathway to doubling this resource in the future through combination of drill rigs and leveraging all the advanced information that was there historically.
And it's what, 100 odd million ounces of silver. How do you get there? Tell us about, if you're an investor looking at this company, Tim, and you say, okay, well, you've got a reasonable cornerstone, 50 million ounces is a very solid start. Why should I believe that you're going to double this resource?
A lot of this resource was established back in the late 90s and early 2000s, and it was at a far depressed silver and gold price than it was now. So there's been a lot of drilling put in, a lot of inventory defined over this entire operational life. What we're now going for is a completely different gold and silver price, reevaluating all this drill information and building up the resource base from that base information. On top of that, we have discovered multiple new ore zones over the last 6 months on the ground in previous areas that have never been looked at before. So on top of extending the current resources, we also have multiple new areas to put the rig on and grow whole new maiden resources.
So what you're really saying is that there's a lot of low-hanging fruit in the sense that from historic drilling that you've got these areas of mineralisation which are outside the resource. Presumably you're just going to infill drill them with a view to bringing them into the resource.
That's right. None of it is remnant mining. It is all outside the existing mine areas, which is beneficial to us. But saying that, we can still leverage off the existing infrastructure, which was only put in 2015-16.
Let's look at silver for a minute, Tim. There's obviously a growing appetite among investors to get some exposure to silver. It's never been a metal that the ASX and its investors have been particularly au fait with. There's very limited choice on the ASX if you want silver exposure, but there seems to be a widely held view that silver is heading for a big run. We spoke to a silver expert out of North America on the Whole Truth podcast a couple of weeks ago, Peter Kraut, and he was outlining his view of the silver market, which basically said the price is going to go bananas, courtesy of its newfound role as the key metal in these solar panels. It's a solar panel driven story. And how do you get some exposure to what is arguably the next lithium? That's the question. If you look at the ASX, there's very limited choice there. Obviously, Mitre is saying, well, come and have a look at us. We're in the silver game. What do you make of the outlook for silver?
I think the outlook for silver is absolutely phenomenal over the coming years. You have to think that the metal has been in deficit for the last 3 years. We physically only mine and recycle 1 billion ounces, and we're consuming 1.2 to 1.25 billion ounces.
So it's already in deficit.
It's already in deficit. So these stocks are coming from vault stocks. There is only about 7 years worth of vault stocks left in the world at the current rate, not accounting for the exponential growth in solar, 5G network, and hydrogen storage that this technology is used in. So we think with the increased growth, this metal is going to go through the roof and is the underlooked critical metal. It's not even on the Australian critical metals list.
And a lot of this, of course, I assume, is being bought by China, given that they are the dominant manufacturer of solar panels.
Yes, what we're seeing dominantly is your solar panel, your silver paste is manufactured dominantly in China. But what we're finding now is a lot of the American silver companies are trying to bring that technology and upstream, downstream the silver process in America itself.
So what happens at Mitre now over the next few months? Obviously, you're onto what looks like a pretty big system, to say the least. How do you create value here over the next 3 to 6 months?
Our main value driver is going to be through that drill bit. So at the same time as we're reevaluating all the existing data that's there, we're going to have 2 rigs on the ground drilling out new areas that haven't had resources put over them, and they're well-advanced targets. Some of these ore zones stretch for 1 kilometre on surface and are about 100 metres wide of vein swarms. So significant targets that the rigs are drilling at the moment.
Now, you have one other small advantage. You mentioned there's a processing plant on site, but there's also an assay laboratory, isn't there?
That's right. We have a assay lab that has been there for the life of the operation. We can get 48-hour turnaround on our assaying data there. At the same time,
that's phenomenal.
Yeah, no, it is. That's one of our biggest advantages. So we drill, we cut, we assay on site.
So you're saying basically with 3 rigs turning, some of, 1 or 2 of which will be targeting known mineralisation to bring it into the resource and your own assay lab, you'd like to think that you guys can generate some pretty strong news flow.
That's right. No, we have a lot of news flow coming over from drilling. Our field crews are actively on the ground. As I said, we've made 2 new discoveries in the last 6 months, and we're hoping to have more to follow. And reevaluating all these old resources that a lot of these holes have not been fully cut and assayed and in the past.
What was the feedback you got from analysts when you were, or more pertinently fund managers, should I say, when you were doing this raise, Tim? Do you think they're only really waking up to the whole silver story?
Yeah, I think the Australian market is traditionally, as we've said before, not really focused on silver. It's always been the poorer cousin of gold, whereas the North American markets have been aware of this for the last couple of years. So in the last year, we think that talking to these fund managers, that entire position has been shifting just of this last year.
And what did they say to you? Obviously, they put their checkbook where their mouth is, but were they indicating a growing appetite for silver?
Yeah, no, they have been indicating growing appetite for silver, definitely, considering that on the ASX, there's really only 3 silver companies, including us on the ASX, to actually choose from at the moment. So it's a very tight bunch of companies.
We could probably do with a couple more, to be honest. I mean, it's great being one of a chosen few, but as perhaps a wider pool of stocks might do more to get the fund managers a bit sort of, warmed up to this.
No, definitely. And what you see is that a lot of the silver companies have a combination of silver and your base metals, whereas Cerro is the definition where it is just gold and silver.
Right. Tim, it sounds like, based on the response to the raising and the drilling plan you have with 3 rigs, really the thing should continue on its merry way, shouldn't it? I mean, what's the market cap now? $60-odd million post the raise. You got $12 million in cash. It really should be relatively smooth sailing from here.
No, that's right. The aim of it is growing this resource over the next year period. So it's going to be drilling, reevaluating, and re-establishing this base case resource. And then that will flow into any future study work that is occurring down the track.
Great. Tim, thanks for your time.
No, thank you.
You've been listening to The Whole Truth, a Resources Rising Stars podcast, produced by Resource Media, hosted by Paul Armstrong for Reed Corporate. Please note that Reed Corporate does not provide investment advice, and investors should seek personalised advice before making any investment decisions.